late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grandeur Hotel lobby, casting golden patterns across the polished marble floors. My fingers moved across the ivory keys of the grand piano, muscle memory guiding them through a piece I had composed during sleepless nights in my cramped studio apartment. The melody was melancholic yet hopeful, like watching storm clouds part to reveal unexpected sunshine. I had been playing piano at the Grandeur for exactly 9 months and 14 days. Not that I was counting. Well, maybe I was. Each day marked another small victory in my fight to rebuild a life that had shattered so completely, I sometimes wondered if the pieces would ever fit together again. The hotel lobby was my stage now, a far cry from the concert halls I had once dreamed of filling. But dreams, I had learned, were luxuries that vanished when reality came knocking with eviction notices and medical bills that multiplied like rabbits. My name was Claire Morrison, and 3 years ago, I had been a rising star at Juilliard. Today, I was grateful for the $75 an hour this hotel paid me to provide ambiance for guests who rarely looked up from their phones. My current piece was an original composition, something I had started writing the night my mother died. 18 months ago now, though sometimes it felt like yesterday, and other times like a lifetime. Cancer had taken her quickly once it started, leaving me with nothing but debt from treatments that ultimately failed, and a Steinway upright piano she had insisted on buying me for my 16th birthday, even though we could barely afford groceries that month. That piano was gone now, sold to pay for her funeral. The irony was not lost on me. I transitioned into another original melody, this one lighter, more playful. A few guests glanced my way from the leather sofas scattered throughout the lobby. A couple waiting for their car smiled at each other. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his watch impatiently, clearly more focused on his schedule than the music floating through the air. That was fine. I was not playing for applause or recognition anymore. I was playing because it was the only thing that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense. Because when my fingers touched those keys, I was not a struggling musician working 3 jobs to afford a studio apartment with questionable heating. I was not the daughter who could not save her mother. I was just music, pure and simple and whole. The general manager, Marcus Chen, had hired me on the spot after hearing me play at an audition 9 months ago. He was a kind man in his 50s who appreciated classical music and treated his staff with genuine respect, a rarity in the luxury hotel industry. The pay was not enough to live on alone, so I supplemented it with teaching piano to children in the evenings and working weekend shifts at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Sleep was optional, exhaustion was constant, but I was surviving. Some days that felt like enough. As my current piece came to a close, I noticed a small crowd had gathered near the concierge desk. Not unusual for the Grandeur, which catered to celebrities, politicians, and the obscenely wealthy. I had played background music for enough important people over the past months to recognize the energy that preceded their arrival. The heightened attention from staff, the subtle repositioning of security personnel, the way the air itself seemed to shift in anticipation. I began another piece, this one a classical arrangement I had adapted, adding my own variations to make it uniquely mine. My eyes stayed focused on the keys, my posture straight, but relaxed in the way my first piano teacher had drilled into me when I was 7 years old. Shoulders back, Claire. Let your arms flow like water. Feel the music. Do not force it. Mrs. Patterson's voice still echoed in my head during every performance, a ghost of guidance from a woman who had believed in my talent, even when my own father had called it a waste of time. He had left when I was 9, decided that supporting a wife and daughter was too much responsibility for a man who wanted to find himself in Colorado. Last I heard, he had found himself a new family instead. I had not spoken to him since my mother's funeral, where he had appeared long enough to confirm he would not be contributing to any expenses. I pushed the bitter thoughts away, letting the music absorb them. This piece was building to something, the notes climbing like stairs toward a peak I could feel approaching. My fingers danced faster, the melody growing more complex, more passionate. This was the part I loved, when the music took over completely, and I was just a vessel for something bigger than myself. That was when I felt it, a shift in the atmosphere that had nothing to do with arriving celebrities or important guests. A presence, heavy and focused, like a spotlight had suddenly turned in my direction. My fingers never faltered. Years of training keeping the music flowing even as awareness prickled along my spine. I risked a glance up. He stood 20 feet away, frozen mid-stride near the entrance to the lobby. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that was styled with casual perfection. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him like it had been created specifically for his body, which it probably had. Even from this distance, I could see the sharp lines of his face, the intensity in his eyes as they fixed on me, on the piano, on the music filling the space between us. No, not just looking, listening, really listening, in a way that made something in my chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Behind him, a small entourage had come to an equally abrupt halt. A woman in a sleek black dress with a tablet clutched to her chest. 2 men who were clearly security, their posture alert and assessing. Another man in a suit that screamed lawyer or high-level executive, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he realized his principal had stopped moving. But the tall man, the one whose presence seemed to fill the entire lobby despite his stillness, he was not looking at any of them. His entire focus was on me, on my hands moving across the keys, on the melody that had apparently rooted him to the spot. I should have felt self-conscious, should have been nervous playing for someone who was so obviously important, so clearly powerful. Instead, I felt seen in a way I had not experienced in years, not as background noise or ambient entertainment, but as an artist creating something worth stopping for. The piece reached its crescendo, the notes ringing out clear and strong before softening into the gentle resolution I had crafted during a particularly difficult night when grief had felt like it might drown me. The final notes faded into silence, hanging in the air like morning mist. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then the man pulled out his phone, spoke briefly into it, and I saw his lips form 2 words that would change everything. Cancel my flight. My hands remained poised above the keys, uncertainty flooding through me. What just happened? The man was walking toward me now, his entourage scrambling to follow. The woman with the tablet speaking rapidly into her own phone with increasing urgency. I stood, smoothing down the simple black dress I wore for performances, suddenly acutely aware of how my second-hand heels pinched my feet and how I had skipped lunch again to save money. The gap between us, between his world and mine, felt oceanic. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw with a hint of 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes that were an impossible shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that caught me, the way they seemed to see past all my carefully constructed walls to the person beneath. He stopped a respectful distance away, his expression unreadable. I waited for him to speak, to explain why he had canceled a flight to stand here staring at me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and measured, with the faintest hint of an accent I could not quite place. British, perhaps, or educated somewhere international. You wrote that piece yourself. It was not a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, most of what I play here is original. Why? The question was so direct, so stripped of social niceties, that I blinked in surprise. Why do I write music? Why do you play here? He gestured to the lobby, to the piano, to the guests who had already returned to ignoring my existence. You should be performing at Carnegie Hall, not providing background noise for people checking their email. Something in my chest cracked at his words, at the casual way he identified exactly what hurt most about my current situation. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to show how deeply that observation cut. Carnegie Hall does not pay the rent. His eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Fair point. He extended his hand. Alexander Thornton. The name registered immediately, even in my exhausted, work-consumed state. Even having deliberately avoided news and social media for months, I knew who Alexander Thornton was. Tech billionaire, founder of Thornton Industries, which had revolutionized something important in the field of renewable energy that I did not fully understand. Philanthropist, youngest self-made billionaire on record, and apparently someone who canceled flights to talk to hotel pianists. Claire Morrison, I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, warm despite the air conditioning that kept the lobby at a constant 68 degrees. Claire Morrison, he repeated, as if testing how my name sounded. Tell me, Claire Morrison, what would it take to get you to play somewhere that actually deserves your talent? I laughed, a short, bitter sound I had not intended to release. Mr. Thornton, I appreciate the compliment, but I do not think you understand how the music world works. Talent is common, opportunity is not, and right now this hotel provides me with steady income, which is more than most musicians can say. Alexander, he corrected, not Mr. Thornton. And you are right, I do not understand the music world, but I understand talent when I see it, and I understand that what you just played moved me in a way nothing has in years. That has value. The woman with the tablet had reached us, slightly out of breath. Alexander, your conference call with Tokyo is in 15 minutes, and the jet was scheduled to depart for London at 6. If we do not leave now, you will miss the dinner with the Prime Minister. I will call the Prime Minister personally to reschedule, Alexander said, not taking his eyes off me, and someone else can handle Tokyo. The woman, his assistant presumably, looked like she might faint. But this is the third time this month you have rescheduled. The board is already concerned about your... She paused, glancing at me uncertainly. Your recent unpredictability. Then the board can be concerned. He finally looked at her, his expression softening slightly. Amanda, I need you to trust me on this. Clear my schedule for the evening. Amanda, to her credit, recovered quickly. She tapped something on her tablet with sharp, efficient movements. Consider it done. Your evening is now free. Should I book a table somewhere? Alexander looked back at me, and there was something in his expression I could not quite read. That depends. Claire, would you have dinner with me? Every logical cell in my brain screamed at me to say no. This man was clearly important, clearly powerful, and clearly used to getting what he wanted. Men like Alexander Thornton did not have dinner with women like me unless they wanted something, and whatever that something was, I probably could not afford to give it. But there was something else, something in the way he had stood transfixed by my music, something in the way he looked at me not as an acquisition or a curiosity, but as a person worth stopping for. When was the last time anyone had looked at me like that? I have to finish my shift, I heard myself say. I am here until 6. It is 5:47 now, Alexander replied with the faintest hint of a smile. I can wait 13 minutes. Mr. Chen appeared at my elbow, his professional mask in place but his eyes questioning. Miss Morrison, if you need to leave early, I am sure we can manage. I met his gaze, seeing the concern there mixed with something else. Recognition, perhaps, of who Alexander Thornton was and what his interest might mean. Mr. Chen was protective of his staff, but he was also a businessman who understood the value of connections. It is fine, I said firmly. I finish my shift at 6. If Mr. Thornton wants to wait, he is welcome to. Alexander, he corrected again, but his smile had grown. I will be here at 6:01. True to his word, Alexander was waiting near the piano at exactly 6:01. I had watched him from the corner of my eye during my final pieces, noticed how he had claimed one of the leather armchairs, with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to occupy any space. His entourage had scattered, though I spotted security personnel positioned discreetly around the lobby. Amanda had disappeared, presumably to manage the chaos his canceled flight had created. I gathered my sheet music and purse from behind the piano, very aware of Alexander's eyes tracking my movements. Up close again, I was struck by how much presence he had, the way he seemed to command attention without even trying. "Ready?" he asked, standing as I approached. "I should change?" I gestured down at my performance dress, suddenly self-conscious about having dinner in work clothes. "You look perfect," he said simply, and the way he said it made me believe he meant it. The restaurant Alexander chose was not what I expected. Instead of some exclusive, impossible-to-get-into establishment where the waiters knew his name and the wine cost more than my monthly rent, he directed his driver to a small Italian place in the West Village. The kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles, where the owner greeted customers like family and the air smelled of garlic and fresh basil. "This is your idea of dinner?" I asked as we slid into a corner booth, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Alexander's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time. "Best carbonara in New York, and they have never once treated me differently because of who I am." He paused. "I thought you might appreciate that." He was right. I did. We ordered carbonara for him and cacio e pepe for me, along with a bottle of wine that Alessandro, the owner, insisted was from his cousin's vineyard in Tuscany, and absolutely could not be refused. As we waited for the food, Alexander leaned back against the worn leather of the booth and studied me with that same intense focus he had shown in the hotel lobby. "Tell me about the piece you were playing when I walked in," he said, "the one that made me stop." I took a sip of wine, buying time to formulate an answer. "It is called Aftermath. I wrote it after my mother died." "I am sorry," he said, and the simplicity of it, the lack of platitudes or awkward sympathy, made it easier to continue. She had cancer. We caught it late, and the treatment was aggressive and expensive and ultimately futile. I sold everything that mattered to pay for it, including my Steinway, which she had sacrificed so much to give me. The piece is about that, about loss and grief, and the strange way life continues even when you think it should stop. Alexander was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his wine glass. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. "Sudden heart attack. One moment she was there, the next she was not. I remember thinking the world was wrong for continuing to turn without her in it. I felt something shift between us, a recognition of shared pain that transcended our vastly different circumstances." "I am sorry," I echoed his earlier sentiment. He nodded once, accepting. Music was her passion too. She taught piano, actually. Never professionally, just to neighborhood kids in our apartment building. He smiled at the memory. She was terrible at collecting payment. Half her students were on permanent scholarship whether their parents knew it or not. "She sounds like she was a good person." "The best," Alexander agreed. "She would have loved your music. She always said you could tell everything about a person's soul by how they played piano." Our food arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The pasta was as good as promised, each bite a perfect combination of simple ingredients elevated by skill and care. Around us, the restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter, the kind of authentic atmosphere that no amount of money could manufacture. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said suddenly. "Why did you stop pursuing performance? Juilliard does not just accept anyone. You must have had opportunities." I set down my fork, the familiar shame creeping up my spine. "How did you know I went to Juilliard? I have Amanda research anyone who interests me." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if having someone investigated was perfectly normal behavior. "You were in your 3rd year when you withdrew. Full scholarship, glowing reviews from your professors, and then nothing. What happened?" The instinct to deflect, to protect my privacy, warred with an unexpected desire to be honest with this man who had shared his own loss so openly. "My mother got sick," I said finally. "Someone had to work, had to manage her care, had to make sure the bills got paid. Music school does not leave much time for reality. You could have gone back after she passed. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what money? I lost my scholarship when I withdrew. By the time she died, I was so far in debt that going back was not an option. I am still digging myself out. If you enjoyed this story so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring you more stories like this one. Now, let us continue with Claire and Alexander's dinner. Alexander's expression had shifted, his business mind clearly working through calculations. How much debt? The question was so direct it caught me off guard. That is personal. So is asking me to dinner and then interrogating me about my past. I countered, meeting his gaze steadily. But you did it anyway. Fair point, he conceded with a slight smile. I am trying to understand why someone with your talent is playing in hotel lobbies instead of concert halls. Because concert halls do not call back when you have a gap in your resume and no connections. Because the music world is small and competitive and unforgiving. Because talent is not enough, and I learned that lesson the hard way. What if I could change that? I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. What? Alexander leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on me. What if I could provide you with opportunities, introduce you to people who matter, help you rebuild your career? Why would you do that? Because I believe in investing in exceptional things, and you are exceptional. He said it with such certainty, such conviction, that for a moment, I almost believed him. I have spent the last decade building a company based on recognizing potential before others see it. Your music has something rare, Claire. Authenticity, emotion, truth. That is worth investing in. I set down my glass, my hands trembling slightly. Mr. Thornton, Alexander, I appreciate what you are saying, but I cannot accept charity. His eyes flashed. This is not charity. I do not do charity. This is recognition of talent and a business proposition. What kind of business proposition? Perform at my foundation's annual gala next month. We raise money for education initiatives, and we bring in performers from around the world. Serious musicians, the kind who get reviewed in the Times and booked at major venues. Your performance there would put you in front of every major player in New York's music scene. My heart was racing now, hope and fear tangling together in my chest. And what do you get out of this? The satisfaction of knowing I helped launch a career that deserves to be launched. Plus, his smile turned slightly mischievous. My guests will actually pay attention to the music for once, instead of just networking and drinking expensive wine. This feels too good to be true. Alexander reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His skin was warm, slightly rough in a way that suggested he did not just sit behind a desk all day. Claire, I did not build a billion-dollar company by making poor investments. You are not too good to be true. You are exactly good enough, and it is time someone reminded you of that. Tears burned behind my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of this man who had already seen too much of my vulnerabilities. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I will do it. Excellent. Alexander squeezed my hand once before releasing it. Now finish your pasta before Alessandro comes over and insults us for wasting his cousin's hard work. We spent the rest of dinner talking about music, about his company, about everything and nothing. Alexander was surprisingly easy to talk to once the business discussion was set aside. He was well-read, curious, and had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard and made me laugh in a way I had not in months. By the time we left the restaurant, it was nearly 10, and I was exhausted in the best possible way. Not the bone-deep fatigue of working 3 jobs, but the pleasant tiredness that came from an evening well spent. Alexander's driver pulled up immediately, as if he had been circling the block waiting for a signal. "Let me take you home," Alexander offered. "I can take the subway." "At 10 at night?" He raised an eyebrow. "I do not think so." "I ride the subway at all hours," I protested. but even I could hear how weak the argument sounded. "Indulge me," he said, opening the car door. "Please." The drive to my neighborhood in Queens felt longer than it was, probably because I was hyper-aware of Alexander sitting beside me in the back of the luxury sedan. We had maintained easy conversation all evening, but now silence had fallen, comfortable but charged with an awareness I could not quite name. When we pulled up to my building, a 5-story walk-up that had seen better days somewhere around 1973, I saw Alexander taking it in with those sharp, assessing eyes. I waited for judgment, for some sign that he was reconsidering his investment in someone who clearly came from such different circumstances. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you for tonight, Claire. I have not enjoyed an evening this much in longer than I care to admit." "Thank you for dinner," I replied, gathering my purse and sheet music. "And for the opportunity. I promise I will not disappoint you." "I know you will not," he said with absolute certainty. "Can I call you to discuss details about the gala?" I wrote my number on a scrap of paper from my bag, very aware that we were exchanging contact information like nervous teenagers rather than adults who had just discussed a business arrangement. "Here." Our fingers brushed as he took the paper, and I felt it again, that spark of connection that had nothing to do with business propositions or career opportunities. Alexander felt it too. I could see it in the way his eyes darkened, in the slight hitch in his breath. "Good night, Claire Morrison," he said softly. "Good night, Alexander Thornton." I was halfway up the stairs to my 3rd-floor apartment when I heard my phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. "Already missing the sound of your music. Looking forward to working together, A." I saved the number and fell asleep that night, with a smile on my face, for the first time in 18 months. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur that felt like stepping into someone else's life. Alexander was true to his word, connecting me with his events coordinator, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Patricia, who took the gala performance as seriously as a military operation. We met twice to discuss set lists, timing, technical requirements, and the kind of grand piano I would be playing. A Steinway concert grand that probably cost more than my mother's entire cancer treatment. But it was not just the professional interactions that filled my days. Alexander called me, actually called, not texted, almost every evening around 9. The first time, I had been walking home from my teaching gig and nearly dropped my phone in surprise when his name lit up the screen. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he had said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Those late-night conversations became the highlight of my days. We talked about everything. His company's latest project, developing affordable solar panels for developing countries. My struggles with a particularly difficult student who refused to practice. His concerns about losing touch with the ideals that had driven him to start his business in the first place. My fears about performing at the gala and potentially humiliating myself in front of people who actually mattered. "You will be brilliant," he assured me during one particularly anxious call. "I have no doubts whatsoever." "Easy for you to say," I countered. "You are not the one performing." "No, but I am the one who stopped walking when I heard you play. Trust me, Claire. Your music has power." We met for dinner twice more during those weeks, always at small, unpretentious places where Alexander could relax without being constantly approached by people who wanted something from him. I learned that he was 34 years old, 6 years older than me. That he had grown up in London but moved to New York for university and never left. That his father had been a factory worker who died of complications from industrial chemical exposure when Alexander was 17, leaving him determined to create technology that would prevent others from suffering the same fate. That his ex-wife, a detail Amanda had somehow left out of her research, had divorced him 2 years ago, citing his obsession with work and inability to prioritize their relationship. That he had not been in a serious relationship since, and had started to wonder if he was capable of connecting with anyone on a deeper level, until he heard me play. "You make me feel things I thought I had lost the capacity for," he admitted one night over Thai food in a restaurant so small we had to share a table with another couple. When I listen to your music, something in me—" He paused, searching for words. "Something in me remembers how to breathe." I did not know how to respond to that level of honesty, to the vulnerability he was showing me despite the walls I knew he kept carefully constructed around himself. So I just reached across the table and took his hand, letting the touch speak what words could not. The night of the gala arrived faster than I was ready for. I stood backstage at the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, wearing a floor-length navy gown that Amanda had insisted was necessary, and which Alexander had paid for despite my protests. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see the crowd assembling, hundreds of people in tuxedos and designer gowns, the kind of wealth and power that made my mouth go dry. "This is insane," I muttered to myself, pressing a hand to my racing heart. What was I thinking? I cannot do this. Yes, you can. I spun around to find Alexander standing behind me, devastatingly handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was not supposed to be back here, was supposed to be out front greeting guests and donors. But here he was, looking at me with such confidence and warmth that some of my panic subsided. "I am terrified," I admitted. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "Terror means you care. It means this matters. Use that energy in your performance. What if I fail? What if I embarrass you?" Alexander reached up and cupped my face in both hands, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones gently. "Claire Morrison, you could never embarrass me. You are about to share your gift with people who desperately need to remember that beauty and truth still exist in this world. That is the opposite of embarrassing." Before I could respond, before I could think, he leaned down and kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, asking permission, then deeper when I responded, my hands coming up to grip his shoulders, steadying myself against the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. When we pulled apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against mine. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you," he whispered. "We should probably discuss this after the performance," I managed, my brain struggling to function. "Absolutely," he agreed, stepping back with a smile that made my knees weak. "But I needed you to know, before you go out there, that whatever happens tonight, I am already proud of you. Already grateful I stopped walking that day." The announcement came then, Patricia's voice crisp over the sound system, asking guests to take their seats for the evening's musical performance. Alexander squeezed my hand once and disappeared back through the curtains, leaving me alone with my piano and my racing heart. I walked onto the stage, the spotlight finding me immediately. The murmur of conversation died down as I took my seat at the magnificent Steinway, adjusting the bench height with hands that trembled only slightly. The keys gleamed under the lights, ivory and ebony waiting for my touch. I found Alexander in the crowd, seated at a table near the front. Our eyes met, and he nodded once, encouraging, believing. I began to play. The first piece was one of my originals, a composition I had written specifically for this night. I called it Emergence, and it told the story of transformation, of rising from darkness into light. My fingers flew across the keys, coaxing out emotions I had kept locked away for too long. Grief, yes, but also hope. Fear, but also courage. Loss, but also the possibility of finding something new. The ballroom had gone completely silent. I could feel every eye on me, every ear tuned to the music pouring from my hands and my heart. This was what I had trained for, what all those years of practice and sacrifice had been leading toward. Not fame or recognition, though those would be welcome. But this moment of pure communication, of touching something true and real in both myself and my audience. I transitioned into my second piece, Aftermath, the one Alexander had first heard. Playing it here in front of hundreds of people, I felt exposed in a way that should have been terrifying. Instead, it was freeing, as if finally sharing this pain meant I no longer had to carry it alone. When the final notes faded into silence, the pause felt eternal. Then the applause began, Not polite charity applause, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation. People were standing, and I saw more than one person wiping their eyes. Alexander was on his feet too, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper, something that made my breath catch. I stood and took a bow, letting the moment wash over me. This was real. This was happening. This was my comeback, orchestrated by a man who had believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. The after-party was a blur of introductions and business cards, of people asking about my training and availability, and whether I had representation. I met the director of Lincoln Center, who expressed interest in having me perform in an upcoming series showcasing emerging composers. A talent agent from a prestigious firm suggested we meet for coffee to discuss possibilities. A well-known classical music critic actually used the word transcendent to describe my performance. Through it all, I kept catching glimpses of Alexander, always watching from across the room with that slight smile on his face. He was networking too, fulfilling his duties as host, but his eyes kept finding mine like magnets pulled by an irresistible force. It was nearly midnight when the crowd finally thinned enough for us to find a moment alone on the terrace overlooking Central Park. The spring air was cool, carrying the scent of blossoming trees and the distant sound of traffic. "You were magnificent," Alexander said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. "I knew you would be, but actually seeing you own that stage. It was..." He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "Thank you," I said softly, "for all of this, for believing in me, for giving me this chance." "Claire." He turned to face me, taking both my hands in his. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." My stomach clenched with sudden anxiety. "Okay." When I stopped walking that day in the hotel lobby, it was not just because your music was beautiful, though it absolutely was. It was because something in me recognized something in you. A kindred spirit, maybe. Someone who understood loss and struggle and the complicated work of rebuilding yourself from ruins. I squeezed his hands, encouraging him to continue. "These past few weeks, getting to know you, they have reminded me that I am more than just my company, more than just my net worth. You have reminded me what it feels like to care about something beyond profits and board meetings." His voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. "You have reminded me what it feels like to hope." "Alexander," I began, but he shook his head gently. "I am falling for you, Claire Morrison. Actually, I think I have already fallen. And I know this is complicated. I know we come from different worlds. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might not work. But I also know that life is short and uncertain. And when you find something rare and true, you do not let it slip away." Tears were streaming down my face now. Happy tears for once. "I am falling for you too," I whispered. "Have been since you canceled your flight." He cupped my face, thumbs wiping away my tears. "Can I kiss you again?" Properly this time, without the excuse of pre-performance nerves. I answered by pulling him down to me, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted like champagne and possibility. His arms wrapped around me, solid and warm and sure, and for the first time in years, I felt truly safe. Not safe as in protected from harm, but safe as in known, seen, valued for exactly who I was. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against mine. "Come home with me tonight." It was not a demand or an expectation, just an invitation. One I desperately wanted to accept. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out reluctantly, ready to ignore whatever it was. Then I saw the name on the screen and my blood ran cold. "What is it?" Alexander asked, immediately sensing the shift in my mood. "It is my landlord." I stared at the message, reading it twice to make sure I understood. "He is selling the building. I have 30 days to find a new place. The universe really has terrible timing," Alexander muttered. Then more seriously, move in with me. I gaped at him. What? Move in with me, he repeated, completely serious. I have more space than I know what to do with. It would solve your immediate problem. And selfishly, I want you close. Alexander, we have known each other for 3 weeks. 3 weeks and a lifetime, he countered. Claire, I am not asking you to marry me. Though if I am honest, that thought has crossed my mind too. I am asking you to take a practical step that solves a real problem and happens to come with the benefit of us being able to see each other without coordinating schedules and crossing boroughs. This is crazy, I said, but I was already considering it, already imagining what it would be like to wake up in his space, to have morning coffee together, to fall asleep in his arms. Crazy is what makes life interesting, he replied. Play it safe and you end up playing hotel lobbies instead of concert halls. Though no offense to hotel lobbies, that is where I found you, so I have a soft spot for them. I laughed despite the overwhelming nature of the decision looming before me. You are impossible. Is that a yes? I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had stopped walking when he heard my music, who had canceled important meetings to get to know me, who had given me an opportunity when I needed it most. Not as charity, but as an investment in someone he believed in. Who kissed me like I was precious and looked at me like I was seen. What did I have to lose? My dignity. I had already lost that months ago when I was selling my possessions to pay medical bills. My independence? I had been alone long enough to know that independence was overrated when it meant being lonely. My heart? He already had that whether I admitted it or not. If you enjoyed this turning point in Claire and Alexander's story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Now let us see how their story continues. Yes, I said, the word feeling both terrifying and liberating. Yes, I will move in with you. Alexander's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Really? Really, I confirmed, then held up a finger. But I have conditions. Name them. I pay rent. Something reasonable that I can actually afford, but I am not living there for free. I am not a kept woman. Done. What else? I keep my other jobs until I am stable enough financially that losing them would not be devastating. That might take months. Agreed. Though I think you will find your performance tonight opened more doors than you realize. What else? I get my own space. A room for my music, where I can work without interruption. The condo has 7 bedrooms, Claire. Pick whichever one you want. Any other demands? Just one, I said, stepping closer to him. We take this one day at a time. No expectations, no pressure. We see where it goes. Alexander pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead. One day at a time, he agreed, starting with tonight. Moving into Alexander's penthouse condo was surreal. The place was massive, taking up the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, with views that made my queen's apartment look like a cardboard box. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that could have serviced a restaurant, bathrooms larger than my entire previous living space. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. True to his word, Alexander gave me the room with the best acoustics for my music. It had a Steinway grand piano, not as large as the concert grand I had played at the gala, but still worth more than a year of my previous salary, and space for composition, and walls that had been soundproofed for exactly this purpose. Your ex-wife was a musician? I guessed, running my fingers over the pristine keys. Alexander's expression darkened slightly. No, but I always thought I might want to learn someday. Now I'm glad I prepared the space. It was meant for you all along. The first few days were an adjustment. We circled each other carefully, both hyper-aware of the other's presence, both trying to establish routines that accommodated this new shared reality. Alexander was up early, usually in his home office by 6 a.m., for calls with overseas offices. I kept my job at the hotel, refusing to give up the steady income until I had actual contracts from the opportunities that had emerged from the gala performance. We had dinner together every night he was in town, either cooking at home or visiting those small restaurants he favored. We talked endlessly, learning each other's quirks and histories and dreams. I discovered he slept terribly, often waking at 3 a.m., with his mind racing about projects or problems. He learned I needed at least an hour at the piano each morning before I could face the day, working through whatever emotions had accumulated while I slept. Our physical relationship developed slowly, almost cautiously, kisses and touches that grew progressively deeper, but always stopping before things went too far. Not from lack of desire, that was evident in every heated glance and stolen moment, but from a mutual understanding that once we crossed that line, there would be no going back. 2 weeks after I moved in, that changed. I had been practicing a new composition, something complicated and angry that reflected my frustration with a teaching student's mother who had accused me of being too hard on her precious child who, in reality, refused to practice and then blamed me for his lack of progress. My fingers were flying across the keys, pounding out my irritation, when I sensed Alexander behind me. "Bad day?" he asked, his voice close to my ear. "Entitled parents who think their children are prodigies when they are actually just lazy," I replied, not stopping my playing. "Sorry, I know that sounds harsh." "It sounds honest," he said. "I like when you are honest." The piece I was playing built to a crescendo, my emotions pouring out through my hands. When I finally finished, chest heaving slightly from the exertion, I felt Alexander's hands on my shoulders, gentle but firm. "You are tense," he observed, his thumbs finding the knots in my muscles and working them carefully. I closed my eyes, leaning back into his touch. "That feels amazing." "You carry everything in your shoulders," he murmured, his hands sliding down my arms and back up. "All that stress, all that worry. You need to learn to let some of it go." Easier said than done. His hands moved to my neck, fingers tangling in my hair as he tilted my head back. His lips found my throat, pressing soft kisses along my pulse point. "Or maybe," he said between kisses, "you just need someone to help you remember how to relax." "Alexander," I breathed, my hands coming up to cover his. "Tell me to stop and I will," he said, his mouth now at my ear. "But I really do not want to stop." I turned on the piano bench, facing him. His eyes were dark with desire, his carefully controlled facade cracked to reveal the want beneath. I reached up and pulled him down to me, answering his question with a kiss that held nothing back. We made it to his bedroom, barely, leaving a trail of discarded clothing in our wake. What followed was intense and passionate and surprisingly tender. Two people who had been circling each other finally giving in to the gravity pulling them together. Alexander was attentive and generous, taking his time to learn what I liked, what made me gasp and arch into his touch. Afterwards, we lay tangled together in his enormous bed, both breathing hard, both slightly stunned by the intensity of what had just happened. "So," Alexander said after a moment. "That was..." He paused, searching for an appropriate word. "Yeah," I agreed, understanding exactly what he meant. "That was definitely that." He pulled me closer, my head resting on his chest where I could hear his heart still racing. "I do not think I can let you go now," he admitted quietly. "Fair warning." I traced patterns on his skin, processing the implications of what we had just done, of this line we had crossed. "Good," I replied, "because I do not think I want to be let go." The next 2 months were the happiest I had ever been. My career was gaining momentum, with performances booked at increasingly prestigious venues. The Lincoln Center concert was scheduled for June, and I had signed with the agent I met at the gala. My teaching studio had expanded as word spread, and I was able to finally pay off the last of my mother's medical debt. Alexander and I fell into a rhythm, our lives intertwining in ways that felt natural despite the newness of everything. He came to my performances, always in the front row, always watching me with that same intense focus as the day we met. I attended his foundation events, learning to navigate the world of wealth and philanthropy with increasing comfort. But there were challenges too. Alexander's work demanded constant attention, with trips that sometimes lasted weeks. His ex-wife, Victoria, made an unexpected appearance at one of his foundation dinners, beautiful and cold, and making it very clear she thought I was a phase he would outgrow. The media had discovered our relationship, leading to invasive articles speculating about gold diggers and midlife crises that hurt more than I wanted to admit. One particularly brutal gossip column suggested I had deliberately played at the grandeur, knowing Alexander would be there, that our entire relationship was a calculated maneuver on my part to secure financial stability. Alexander had been furious, threatening lawsuits and demanding retractions. I had cried in the bathroom for an hour before composing myself. "Ignore them," he insisted, holding me while I tried to stop shaking. "They are parasites who feed on other people's happiness." "But what if they are right?" I asked. "What if I am just using you and I do not even realize it?" Alexander pulled back, gripping my shoulders firmly. "Claire Morrison, look at me. You are not using me. You have never asked me for anything. You insisted on paying rent. You kept your jobs even when you did not need to. You fight me every time I try to buy you something. If anything, I am the one who pursued you, who pushed us to move faster than maybe we should have. But everyone thinks that's why I'm with you, for your money. I do not care what everyone thinks." His voice was fierce. "I care what you think. I care what I know to be true. And the truth is that you make me happier than I have ever been. And that has nothing to do with your bank account and everything to do with your heart." His words helped, but the damage was done. I found myself second-guessing everything, wondering if people looked at me and saw nothing but a gold digger. It affected my playing, my confidence, my ability to lose myself in the music the way I always had. Alexander noticed, of course. 2 weeks after the article appeared, he cornered me in the music room where I had been staring at blank sheet music for an hour, unable to write a single note. "Talk to me," he said, sitting beside me on the piano bench. "Please." "I cannot stop hearing their voices in my head," I admitted. "Every time I sit down to play, every time I work on a composition, I wonder if I am really doing it for the music, or because I want to prove I deserve to be here." "You do not have anything to prove," Alexander said firmly. "Not to them, not to me, not to anyone." "But I do," I insisted. "Do you not see? You gave me this opportunity. You made this possible. Everything I have now is because you stopped walking that day. What if I cannot actually do this on my own? What if I'm only successful because of you?" Alexander stood abruptly, pacing across the room with barely contained frustration. "Claire, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Yes, I gave you a platform. Yes, I introduced you to people who could help your career. But I did not make you talented. I did not make you work all those years at Juilliard. I did not make you sacrifice everything to care for your mother. I did not make you play that piece in the hotel lobby with so much emotion and truth that it literally stopped me in my tracks." He returned to the bench, taking my hands in his. All I did was recognize what was already there. The rest, all of it, that is you, your talent, your dedication, your heart. Please do not let toxic people who do not matter take that away from you. I want to believe that. Then believe it. He brought my hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. Or if you cannot believe it yet, trust me to believe it for both of us until you can. That night, I composed my first piece since the article appeared. I called it Defiance, and it was angry and powerful, and unapologetically me. When I played it for Alexander the next morning, he listened with tears in his eyes. "That," he said when I finished, "is the woman I fell in love with. Welcome back." The words hung in the air between us. Love. He had said love. We had danced around it for weeks, the feeling obvious but unspoken, as if naming it might make it too real, too fragile. You love me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alexander stood and came to me, pulling me up from the bench and into his arms. I love you, Claire Morrison. I love your talent and your stubbornness, and your terrible habit of putting hot sauce on everything. I love how you scrunch your nose when you are concentrating, and how you sing in the shower when you think I cannot hear. I love that you refuse to let me help you financially, even when you desperately needed it, because you are too proud for your own good. His hands framed my face. I love everything about you, and I have been dying to say it for weeks. I love you too, I replied, the words feeling both terrifying and perfect. I love you even though you are a terrible cook, and you work too much, and you have this annoying habit of being right about everything. I love that you canceled your flight, because my music moved you. I love that you believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. His smile was brilliant. We are quite the pair, are we not? The best kind of disaster, I agreed, pulling him down for a kiss. My Lincoln Center debut arrived in mid-June, on a night that was perfect in every way except my nerves. I stood backstage, wearing a deep burgundy gown that Alexander had insisted on buying for the occasion, trying to remember how to breathe. You were fine at the gala, I reminded myself. You can do this. But the gala had been different. That had been Alexander's crowd, people predisposed to like me because he had endorsed me. This was the professional music world. Critics who would shred me if I did not meet their standards. Musicians who had worked their entire careers to play this venue. A knock came at my dressing room door. Come in, I called, expecting Patricia or maybe one of the stage managers. Instead, Alexander appeared, carrying a small wrapped box and wearing his tuxedo like he had been born in it. You are not supposed to be back here, I said, but my smile betrayed how happy I was to see him. I made a substantial donation to the building fund. They are letting me break the rules. He handed me the box. I wanted to give you this before you went on. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny piano. Engraved on the back were the words, "You make me stop walking. A.T." Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. I am wearing makeup. If you make me cry, my face will be ruined. Then do not cry, he said, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. Just know that no matter what happens out there tonight, I am already proud of you. I will always be proud of you. The announcement came, calling me to the stage. Alexander kissed me once, gently, then disappeared back through the corridors. I walked to the wings, took a deep breath, and stepped into the spotlight. The concert grand piano waited, stage center, perfectly lit. Beyond it, 2,000 seats filled with people who had paid to hear me play. I found Alexander in the 5th row center, exactly where he said he would be. Our eyes met, and he nodded, encouraging, believing. I sat down and began to play. My program was ambitious, mixing classical pieces with my own compositions. I opened with Chopin, something technically demanding that would establish my credentials. Then I shifted into my own work, the pieces that told my story. Aftermath, emergence, defiance. And finally, a new composition I had finished just last week, written specifically for this night. I called it Stop Walking, and it was about second chances and unexpected meetings and love that appears when you have given up hoping for it. It was about a man who cared enough to actually listen, and a woman who found her voice again. It built from a simple melody to something complex and soaring, representing the journey we had taken together. As I played the final notes, letting them ring out into the silence, I felt complete in a way I never had before. This was what I was meant to do. This was who I was meant to be. Not despite the struggles and loss and hardship, but because of them. Every painful experience had led me to this moment, to this music, to this life. The applause was thunderous. People stood. I saw critics nodding, musicians in the audience smiling with genuine appreciation. And Alexander, he had tears streaming down his face, making no effort to hide them. I took my bows, soaking in the moment. Then I did something I had not planned, something spontaneous and terrifying and absolutely right. I gestured to Alexander, inviting him onto the stage. He shook his head, but the people around him were encouraging him, and finally he stood and made his way to the stage. When he reached me, I took his hand and spoke into the microphone. "This man," I said to the audience, "stopped walking one day because he heard me play piano in a hotel lobby. He gave me a chance when I had given up on myself, and tonight, I want to thank him publicly for reminding me that my music matters, that I matter, and that sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right time." I turned to Alexander, ignoring the 2,000 people watching us. "I love you," I said, just for him. "Thank you for stopping." "I love you too," he replied, pulling me close. "Thank you for making me want to." The audience went wild, but I barely heard them. In that moment, under the stage lights at Lincoln Center, holding the man who had changed my life, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had led to this. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of despair had been a step on a path towards something better than I could have imagined. 6 months later, Alexander and I stood in a small courthouse in downtown Manhattan with just a handful of friends and family. No elaborate ceremony, no society wedding that would have satisfied the gossip columnists. Just us, making promises to each other that we actually intended to keep. Alessandro from our favorite Italian restaurant catered the small reception we held afterward at the penthouse. Rosa, Alexander's housekeeper who had become like a second mother to me, cried happy tears through the entire celebration. Patricia gave a toast that was surprisingly emotional for someone usually so professional. And Mrs. Abernathy, my former neighbor from Queens who I had stayed close with, told embarrassing stories about the nights she had seen me come home exhausted but determined. But the best part came at the end of the night, when all the guests had left, and Alexander and I were alone in the music room. He sat beside me on the piano bench, and together we played a duet I had been secretly teaching him for weeks. He was not particularly skilled, his timing was off, and he hit wrong notes fairly regularly. But he was trying, learning music because it mattered to me. When we finished, both laughing at his mistakes, he pulled me into his arms. "You know," he said, "I was supposed to be in London that day, the day I heard you play." "I know. You told me you canceled your flight." "No, I mean I almost did not even go into that hotel. My driver suggested a different route to the airport, one that would have bypassed the grandeur completely, but I needed to use the restroom, so I told him to stop there." I pulled back to look at his face. "You are saying you only heard me play because you needed to use the bathroom?" Alexander grinned. "Most romantic how we met story ever, right?" I laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I think it is perfect. Just random and ordinary and completely life-changing. Like us," he agreed. We sat there together, as the city lights twinkled through the windows, my head on his shoulder, his arm around my waist. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing music, the faint strains drifting up through the walls. Life continued around us, indifferent to our happiness. But in this moment, in this room, we had everything we needed. I thought about the girl I had been 18 months ago, drowning in debt and grief and hopelessness. I thought about the moment my fingers had touched those hotel lobby piano keys, playing because I had to, because music was all I had left. I thought about a man who could have walked past but chose to stop, to listen, to see me. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" Alexander asked. "For stopping walking, for giving me a chance, for loving me even when I was too broken to believe I deserved it. He kissed the top of my head. Claire, you were never broken. You were just waiting for someone to see you clearly. I am the one who should be thanking you for letting me be that person. We sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Two people who had learned that sometimes the most important moments in life come from the smallest decisions. To play piano in a hotel lobby instead of taking the day off. To stop walking when music calls to you. To take a chance on someone who looks at you and sees not who you were or who you might be, but exactly who you are. And that, I realized, was what love really meant. Not perfection or rescue or completion. Just being seen, fully and truly, and loved anyway. No, not anyway. Loved because of it. The music in me had never stopped, even in my darkest moments. It had just been waiting for the right person to hear it. And Alexander, against all logic and probability, had been exactly that person. The one who stopped walking. The one who listened. The one who stayed. Our story was not a fairy tale. There were still challenges ahead, still moments of doubt and difficulty we would have to navigate. But we would face them together, this unlikely pair who had found each other in a hotel lobby on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need exactly when you need it. You just have to be brave enough to play your music loud enough for the right person to hear. And if you are very lucky, they will stop walking. They will listen. And they will choose to stay. Alexander and I chose to stay every single day. And that made all the difference. Thank you so much for joining me for this beautiful journey of Claire and Alexander. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps me bring you more stories about love, second chances, and the power of following your heart. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of their story. I love hearing from you. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when we least expect them. Keep believing in magic.